The red dust storm had finally settled, leaving Mars looking less like a hellscape and more like a slightly less hellish landscape. Juno stood on the edge of the perimeter fence, squinting into the dull glow of the colony's flickering lights. "Well, at least we won't die of boredom," she muttered, kicking at a piece of scrap that used to be a sensor. Just everything else. Rigel, her partner in engineering and partner in crime, was busy trying to coax life from a stubborn drone. "If this piece of junk ever worked, I'd drop dead from the shock," he grumbled, twisting a wrench like he was trying to strangle it. "Not that I'd mind, considering." Juno chuckled, running a hand through her tangled hair. "Yeah, can't say I'm itching to stick around for the grand finale." "What do you think? Alien invasion or just good old-fashioned mass starvation?" "Why not both?" Rigel replied, finally getting the drone to sputter to life with a series of pathetic beeps. "We could use the excitement." Their banter was standard fare in New Cydonia, the Martian colony with the charm of a brick and the hospitality of a cactus. Life here was a constant cycle of fixing what broke, which was pretty much everything. Mars, it seemed, had a personal vendetta against the fragile humans squatting on its surface. "Hey, what's that?" Rigel squinted at the side of a habitat module, where a set of bizarre symbols had appeared overnight, etched into the metal like a cosmic graffiti artist's signature. Juno walked over, examining the symbols with a frown. "Looks like an alien tried to leave us a Yelp review," she said, tracing the lines with her finger. "But why the hell would they bother with us? Last time I checked, we weren't exactly prime real estate." "Maybe they heard about our gourmet dining options," Rigel replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm as he slapped a hand on his growling stomach. "Who wouldn't want a taste of recycled protein paste, right? 5 stars for ambience, 0 stars for cuisine." Juno laughed, though it was a shaky, uncertain sound. "We should probably get someone to look at this, huh?" Rigel nodded, scratching at the scruff on his chin. "Yeah, probably. Last thing we need is the brass thinking we're going nuts." The symbols were an oddity, but there was no time for a deep dive into Martian hieroglyphics. With the colonist system straining under 100 different failures, alien scrawlings were low on the priority list. Until, of course, they weren't. The next morning, the symbols had spread. They were on every surface, like someone had gone on a spree with a cosmic Sharpie. Juno and Rigel exchanged worried glances over their breakfast of nutrient slop. "Okay, this is getting weird," Juno said, stirring her unappetizing meal with a spoon that doubled as a tool. "Think it's the locals." "You mean the ones we haven't seen because they don't exist?" Rigel replied, raising an eyebrow. "If they did, I doubt they'd be this subtle. Maybe they are waiting for the right moment to ask us to worship them." Juno's attempt at levity fell flat, the humor overshadowed by a growing sense of unease. The colony meetings were usually exercises in futility, but now they gathered with a rare sense of urgency. The room buzzed with the nervous energy of people who'd seen too many things go wrong to trust anything resembling luck. "All right, folks, let's get to it," the colony leader, Captain Thorne, said with the enthusiasm of a man who'd lost all his best words in the last dust storm. "These symbols, anyone got a clue?" "My first guess was an alien language," Juno offered, earning a few skeptical looks. "But maybe it's just Martian for you're screwed. Or it's cosmic spam," Rigel chimed in, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Trying to sell us intergalactic timeshares." A smattering of nervous laughter rippled through the group. Captain Thorne sighed, rubbing his temples. "We need to take this seriously," he said, shooting Rigel a withering look. "If there's a threat, we have to identify it. Not to point out the obvious," Juno said, crossing her arms, "but if this is a threat, it's a pretty passive-aggressive one. No demands, no ransom notes, just art." "Maybe they're just shy," Rigel suggested. "Give 'em time, they'll work up to the probing." The meeting ended with more questions than answers, the kind that didn't like to be ignored. Juno found herself staring at the symbols on her way back to their workshop, her mind running in circles. "Think we should try to communicate?" she asked Rigel, who was busy pretending not to notice the pile of broken gadgets waiting for their attention. And say what? Dear alien overlords, thanks for the art class, now shove off. Rigel grinned, though it faltered as he considered the implications. Honestly, if they're watching us, they're either laughing their tentacles off or really, really bored. As the days dragged on, the symbols refused to fade, as if to remind them that something was watching. Juno and Rigel's usual routine of fixing and grumbling felt more hollow with each passing day. You ever get the feeling we're living in a sitcom with really bad writers? Juno asked one afternoon, kicking a stubborn piece of tech that refused to cooperate. Only all the time, Rigel replied, wiping oil from his hands. Except instead of a laugh track, we get the sound of everything breaking. Makes you wonder if the aliens are rooting for us or just waiting for us to implode, Juno mused, looking up at the sky, or what passed for sky on Mars. If I were them, I'd bring popcorn, Rigel said, tossing his wrench into the toolbox with an air of finality. So what's the plan? I say we pretend nothing's wrong, Juno suggested, her tone laced with irony. Keep fixing things until we either solve the mystery or run out of duct tape. Sounds like a plan, Rigel said with a shrug. Though if they start demanding sacrifices, I'm volunteering you. Juno laughed despite herself, the tension easing for a moment. I'd make a lousy sacrifice. Too much sarcasm, not enough virginity. Their gallows humor was a bomb, however temporary. But beneath the jokes lay a gnawing fear that whispered in the quiet moments, taunting them with the unknown. That night, as the colony settled into an uneasy sleep, the lights flickered ominously. Juno lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling as if the answers were written there. Rigel's snores provided a rhythm to her thoughts, a reminder that even in the face of cosmic mysteries, some things remained stubbornly human. You know, she said softly, though she knew he couldn't hear, if they do show up, maybe we can just bore them to death. The symbols were no longer just an oddity, they were a presence, a silent reminder that Mars was not as empty as they'd thought. And as dawn crept over the horizon, a strange hush fell over the colony, as if the very air was holding its breath. Juno sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and found Rigel already awake, staring intently at a screen. "What's up?" she asked, joining him. "Communication from Earth," Rigel said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "They're picking up strange readings from our sector." "Want us to investigate?" "Great," Juno said, her tone dry. "Just what I wanted, alien ghost hunting." "Look on the bright side," Rigel said, flashing a wry smile. "At least it means they haven't forgotten us." As they geared up for another day of existential dread and mechanical failure, the symbols seemed to watch, waiting for the moment to make themselves known. And all the while, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they were being toyed with, like pawns in a game they didn't know they were playing. "Ready for another day in paradise?" Rigel asked, clapping Juno on the shoulder as they headed out. "Absolutely," Juno replied, rolling her eyes. "Can't wait to see what fresh hell awaits us." Together, they stepped into the harsh Martian light, a pair of engineers caught in a cosmic joke with no punchline. But as they settled into their routine of fixing, grumbling, and pretending not to care, the symbols loomed larger, a constant reminder that the universe was vast, inscrutable, and not as empty as it seemed. And as the day wore on, one thing became abundantly clear. Whatever waited in the shadows, it was biding its time, watching, waiting, and maybe, just maybe, laughing. The red dust of Mars had a way of getting everywhere: boots, clothes, crevices of machinery, and occasionally, dreams. Juno woke up that morning feeling like she'd inhaled half the planet. She coughed, gagged on Martian grit, and rolled out of her bunk, silently cursing the endless sandblasting they'd all agreed to call a sky. "Rise and shine, Juno, or just rise. Shining's optional," Rigel grunted from the other side of the room, already tinkering with a contraption that looked deceptively important. "Nice to see you're feeling optimistic," Juno replied, running a hand through her hair, which seemed to have acquired its own ecosystem of dust. "Any word on our extraterrestrial Banksy friends?" "Nothing new," Ridgel said, frowning at a particularly stubborn bolt. Just more of the same cosmic doodles. Maybe they think they are improving the place. As they exited their quarters, Juno noticed with a jolt that the symbols had spread further, now crawling up the walls like some kind of alien vine. Great! They're multiplying. Just what we needed. Martian graffiti gone viral. Ridgel sighed, his eyes scanning the familiar lines. It's like the universe's way of saying up yours in hieroglyphics. They trudged to the central hub, where the colony council was gathered, a mass of tired faces and bleak expressions. Captain Thorne stood at the helm, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, perhaps even floating in the vacuum of space. "Morning, folks," he began, voice barely above a grumble. "We've got a situation." And by situation, I mean the usual mess, just with more art. A murmur of nervous laughter rippled through the room. Juno and Ridgel exchanged glances, each wondering who'd break first and admit this was all getting a bit too close encounters for comfort. "Any new theories?" Captain Thorne asked, hands on his hips like he was daring someone to say something sensible. Juno cleared her throat. "Well, if I didn't know better, I'd say we've been volunteered for an alien scavenger hunt. Except no one's given us the list and the grand prize is probably just a swift kick in the ass." Thorne stared at her, then nodded slowly. "Creative, at least. Anyone else?" Ridgel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "I still think it's cosmic spam. Maybe they're trying to sell us something." "Like what?" Juno asked, nudging him. "Intergalactic internet plans." "Alien VPN," Ridgel replied, deadpan. "Gotta protect your data from those pesky Earthlings." Captain Thorne wasn't amused. "Look, jokes aside, we're getting reports of unusual activity, people seeing things, hearing things." "We need to take this seriously." "Seeing things?" Juno echoed, trying not to laugh. "You mean like visions of tax collectors finally leaving us alone?" "No, more like visions of strange landscapes, unfamiliar stars." Thorne's voice was heavy with a seriousness that made the room colder somehow. "And it's not just one or two people, it's spreading." Juno felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. "So, what?" "The aliens are broadcasting their vacation slides. Whatever it is, it's got people spooked," Thorne continued, ignoring her sarcasm. "We need to figure out why." The room lapsed into silence, everyone lost in their own thoughts, likely thinking the same thing. This was way above their pay grade. Juno glanced at Ridgel, who was staring into space like he was hoping to find answers written in invisible ink. "Okay," Juno said, breaking the silence. "Let's assume these symbols are some kind of language. What if they're trying to communicate with us?" "Maybe they are," Ridgel said with a shrug. "Or maybe it's just art for art's sake. Either way, we need to find out," Thorne interjected, cutting through their banter. "There's a Martian historian in the colony, Dr. Lyra. She might have some insight into what these symbols mean." "Right," Juno said, not particularly thrilled by the idea of consulting a historian on what felt like a bad acid trip. "We'll check it out." After the meeting, Juno and Ridgel found themselves in Dr. Lyra's cramped office, crammed with dusty books and screens displaying the same symbols now plastered across the colony. Dr. Lyra was an intimidating figure, eyes sharp and voice sharper. "So, you're the brave souls looking to decode ancient Martian graffiti," Ridgel raised an eyebrow. "We prefer to think of ourselves as masochists with a death wish." Dr. Lyra nodded approvingly. "A fine distinction. These symbols, they're not just marks. They're tied to old Martian legends. Stories of deities that watched over the planet eons ago." "Deities, huh?" Juno said, her skepticism palpable. "And here I thought we were the gods here, what with all our high-tech toys and endless bureaucracy." "Perhaps," Dr. Lyra replied, her lips curling into a wry smile. "But these stories speak of watchers, creatures that have been here long before us and will likely remain long after." Ridgel crossed his arms. "So, what? We're dealing with ancient Martian gods. What do they want us to do, offer them a sacrifice of broken drones?" Dr. Lyra shrugged. "Hard to say, but the visions people are experiencing. They could be trying to communicate or warn us." Juno felt a chill creep up her spine. "Warn us about what?" "That," Dr. Lyra said, eyes gleaming with a mix of curiosity and apprehension, "is what we need to find out." They left Dr. Lyra's office with more questions than answers, their minds spinning like the gears in a broken watch. Juno tried to shake off the creeping dread but found it clinging to her like the Martian dust. "Well, that was fun," she said as they walked back to the workshop. "I love a good campfire story, especially when it comes with a side of existential terror." "Could be worse," Rigel replied, shrugging. "We could be stuck back on Earth, dealing with gridlock and climate disasters." "At least here, our disasters come with a view." As they settled back into their routine of repairing broken tech and griping about their lot in life, Juno couldn't help but notice how the symbols seemed to watch them, like a bad joke that refused to be forgotten. The days dragged on, each one bleeding into the next, marked only by the steady spread of symbols and the growing tension among the colonists. Whispers of impending doom floated on the dry Martian air, and no amount of gallows humor could quite dispel it. "Rigel," Juno said one afternoon as she fiddled with a busted sensor, "you ever feel like we're being nudged? Like we're pieces on a board we don't understand?" "All the time," Rigel replied, eyes fixed on a particularly stubborn piece of machinery. "I just figured it was capitalism." "Maybe it is," Juno mused, kicking the sensor in frustration. "Or maybe it's something else, something that's watching and waiting." "Then let's hope it enjoys the show," Rigel said, not looking up, "because I've got no idea how to improve the script." The Colony Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to dismiss the threat as a collective stress response. "Mass hysteria," they called it, with a wave of their hands and a dismissive shrug. "Mass hysteria," Juno repeated, incredulous, as she and Rigel walked back to their quarters after yet another frustrating meeting. "That's what they're calling it." "Guess it's easier to label it and forget it," Rigel replied, his frustration simmering beneath the surface. "Denial's a hell of a drug." "Right. Because ignoring strange symbols and visions always works out great in the movies," Juno said, her sarcasm barely masking her anger. As the days turned into weeks, the symbols refused to fade, a constant reminder that Mars wasn't as empty or as welcoming as they'd once believed. The tension in the colony was palpable, a ticking bomb waiting for the slightest spark. Rigel and Juno continued their work, fixing, cursing, and pretending not to care. But beneath their casual banter lay a gnawing fear, a suspicion that something was coming, something they couldn't stop or even understand. "Hey, Juno," Rigel called one day as they worked side by side, "if we do end up meeting these Martian gods, think they'll have a sense of humor?" "God, I hope so," Juno replied, not missing a beat. "Because otherwise we're screwed." And so they carried on, two engineers caught in a cosmic comedy with an audience that might never show its face. But as each day passed, the symbols loomed larger, a silent reminder that in the vast, inscrutable universe they were being watched. And maybe, just maybe, the watchers were laughing. The Martian crops were failing and the colony was starting to smell like desperation and sire sweat. Juno stood ankle-deep in wilting hydroponics, wondering why the universe seemed hell-bent on kicking them when they were already down. "This is just fantastic," she muttered, glaring at the limp greenery. "It's like the plants are trying a new trend, dying of ennui." Rigel leaned against a nearby metal strut, arms crossed, surveying the devastation with that particular mix of sarcasm and resignation he'd perfected. "Maybe they're just tired of our jokes," he said. "I hear plants are sensitive souls." "Great. Sensitive and suicidal," Juno snapped back, kicking at a stubborn root. "Next thing you know, the rocks will start throwing themselves at us." "That's just what we need," Rigel replied, "a full-blown geological mutiny." The equipment, too, was in a state of rebellion. Every other day, something essential would sputter, cough, and give up the ghost. It seemed the machines had decided that they'd rather be anywhere but Mars. The symbols were continuing their relentless sprawl, now inching their way into the machinery as if trying to get a piece of the action. "Captain Thorne," looking like a man who hadn't slept since the last Earth presidential election, called another meeting in the central hub. And by meeting, it was more like a group therapy session where everyone bitched about the same things and nobody had any solutions. "We're looking at a food shortage," Thorne admitted, his voice hovering somewhere between rage and resignation. "Our systems are failing and the symbols are everywhere. Symbols are the least of our worries if we starve to death," Juno said, trying to lighten the mood, but it only earned her a few despairing glances. "If it's any consolation," Rigel added, "we'll probably freeze to death first." Juno raised her hand, never one to pass up an opportunity for gallows humor. "Can we eat the alien graffiti, asking for a friend?" "Cut the crap," Thorne growled. "We need real solutions. Anyone got any bright ideas for surviving the apocalypse this week?" Juno scratched her chin, a gesture of mock contemplation. "Well, we could start praying to these Martian gods. Maybe they like sacrifices of rusted drones and broken hydroponics." Thorne wasn't amused. "Seriously, anyone, how about using local resources?" Juno said, her voice cutting through the thick fog of despair. "Look, we've been treating this place like it's hostile territory, and maybe it is, but maybe it's got something to offer." "Local resources," Rigel echoed, tilting his head. "You mean like rocks and dust?" "Why not?" Juno shrugged. "They've been here longer than us. Probably got more survival skills too." Thorne sighed, rubbing his temples. "And how do you propose we turn rocks and dust into food and tech?" Juno grinned, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Rigel's a mechanic, I'm an engineer. We improvise. Hell, we can build a coffee machine out of spare parts and sheer determination." "True," Rigel nodded, "but it only makes gritty sludge and gives you a stomach ache." "Details," Juno waved dismissively. "Let's face it, we've got nothing to lose." The room buzzed with a mix of skepticism and reluctant hope. Thorne, caught between desperation and a genuine lack of alternatives, nodded slowly. "All right. Let's explore it, but we need results fast." As the meeting broke up, Rigel turned to Juno. "Rocks and dust, huh? You really think we can MacGyver our way out of this mess?" Juno smiled, though it felt more like a grimace. "If the rocks don't kill us first, maybe they'll lend us a hand." They spent the next few days scavenging through the detritus of Mars, picking through rubble and ruins like cosmic beachcombers. The Martian landscape, as ever, provided a surplus of red dust and not much else. But there was a strange comfort in the routine of it, the rhythm of searching and swearing and occasionally finding something they could use. "Found another one," Rigel called, holding up a chunk of something that might once have been part of a satellite or maybe a barbecue grill. "Think it'll make a good centerpiece at dinner." Juno took it, turning it over in her hands. "Why not? Add a bit of alien chic to the table." It's all about the aesthetic. They returned to their makeshift lab, a cluttered space that smelled of burnt circuits and stale air, and set to work. The symbols continued to creep closer, like silent spectators at a gladiatorial match, but the pair ignored them. For now, there was work to be done, and that was a distraction from the creeping dread of their situation. As night fell, painting the Martian surface in a different kind of somber red, Juno paused to reflect. "You ever wonder if we're just part of some cosmic joke?" Rigel, tinkering with what they hoped would become a makeshift converter, snorted. "If we are, the punchline better be damn good." The days turned into a blur of trial and error, mostly error. There were moments of progress, brief glimmers of hope in the otherwise bleak expanse of failure. But those were quickly snuffed out by another broken part, another malfunctioning sensor, another cosmic slap to the face. "Maybe the gods are testing us," Rigel said one afternoon, wiping sweat and grime from his brow, "seeing if we're worthy of their attention." Juno laughed, a harsh, humorless bark. "If that's the case, I'd rather fail the test. I didn't sign up to be someone's lab rat." But beneath the banter, there was a growing unease. The symbols were changing, shifting, as if responding to some unseen force. The colonists whispered of strange occurrences, visions of a future that didn't include them. The atmosphere in New Cydonia grew thicker with each passing day, a tangible pressure that made every breath feel like a burden. It wasn't long before the inevitable happened. The colony was divided, split into factions with differing ideas of how to handle the growing threat. Some advocated for more drastic action, seeking out the source of the symbols and confronting it head-on. Others, like Juno and Rigel, argued for caution, focusing on survival and adaptation. Tensions bubbled over at another council meeting, the room a tinderbox of fear and frustration. "We need to take action," one colonist shouted, his voice rising above the din. "And do what?" Juno countered, her tone sharp. "Charge into the unknown with pitchforks and torches. We've been through this. It's not that simple." "Simple or not, we're running out of time," the man replied, a wild look in his eyes. "The gods are making demands and we're sitting on our hands waiting to be swept away." "Demands?" Rigel echoed, incredulous. "These are symbols, not a shopping list." Captain Thorne, looking more haggard by the day, tried to restore order, his voice barely commanding above the chaos. "Enough! We won't survive if we turn on each other." The room fell into a tense silence, the air thick with unspoken fears. Juno could feel it, the panic rising like a tide, threatening to drown them all. As the meeting broke up, Juno found herself standing with Rigel, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers to the universe. "You think we're going to make it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rigel shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "Depends. You believe in miracles." Juno didn't answer. Instead, she looked out the window at the Martian landscape, the red dust swirling like a dance of ghosts. The symbols loomed larger than ever, a constant reminder that they were not alone. In the following days, tensions continued to mount. The colony was a powder keg, and it seemed only a matter of time before someone lit the fuse. Meanwhile, Juno and Rigel kept working, kept hoping against hope that their efforts would pay off. One afternoon, as Juno fine-tuned a converter, she looked up to find Rigel staring at her, a strange expression on his face. "What?" she asked, wiping her hands on her overalls. "Just thinking," Rigel replied, a rare seriousness in his tone. "If we can harness Mars, if we can survive this, maybe we can show those gods that we're worth keeping around." Juno smirked, the weight of his words sinking in. "Yeah, maybe. Or maybe we just prove we're too stubborn to die." "Either way," Rigel said, "it's our hell and we're not leaving without a fight." As they continued their work, the symbols seemed to pulse and shift, as if in response to their determination. It was a dance of defiance, a cosmic joke with no punchline. Yet, in those moments of shared struggle and dark humor, Juno and Rigel knew one thing for certain. They were in this together, and they'd fight with every ounce of grit and grim humor they had. Because on Mars, survival was a game of odds, and they were betting on themselves. The Martian dusk settled over New Cydonia like a well-worn cloak, the kind that smelled faintly of mildew and bad decisions. The central hub buzzed with the usual mix of despair and sarcasm, as Captain Thorne tried to keep the colony united with all the zeal of a man herding cats with a water pistol. But today, something was different, something that even the most jaded colonist couldn't ignore. It started with a tremor, a low rumble that vibrated through the colony's bones. Juno, elbow deep in the guts of another broken sensor, paused mid-tweak. "You feel that?" Rigel, half buried under a pile of malfunctioning drones, grunted. "If it's an earthquake, at least it's a fresh way for Mars to try and kill us." But it wasn't just a vibration. The symbols, those enigmatic hieroglyphics that had been spreading like a bad rash, began to shimmer, glowing with an otherworldly light that made the hairs on the back of Juno's neck stand at attention. "Well, that's new," Juno muttered, squinting at the pulsating symbols. "Maybe they're throwing us a rave." Rigel extricated himself from the tangle of drone limbs, frowning. "If so, I didn't get the invite." Before either of them could make another wisecrack, the air in the hub grew thick, charged with an electric tension that set everyone on edge. And then, like a curtain lifting on a very peculiar play, figures began to coalesce from the glowing symbols. They weren't quite human, more like an artist's abstract interpretation of what gods might look like if they spent too much time in a blender. Each avatar had the unsettling ability to shift and morph, blending alien grandeur with a distinctly Martian flair for the dramatic. "Well, crap," Rigel said, summing up the sentiment of everyone present with admirable brevity. The avatars moved with a strange grace, their forms rippling like water. One, with eyes that glowed like twin suns, spoke, its voice resonating like a chorus of whispers. "We are the Harbingers, and you mortals stand on sacred ground." Captain Thorne stepped forward, doing a commendable job of not looking like he was about to soil himself. "What do you want?" The Avatar's gaze swept the room, settling on Thorne with an intensity that could melt steel. "Worship, devotion, acknowledgement of our dominion." Juno, never one to back down from a challenge, crossed her arms. "Sorry, we're fresh out of devotion. Can I interest you in some passive-aggressive resistance instead?" The avatars didn't seem to appreciate the humor. Their forms shifted, becoming more imposing, as if to remind the humans of their insignificance in the cosmic scheme of things. "You will serve or you will suffer." Rigel leaned over to Juno, whispering, "I'm guessing there's no third option like negotiate over coffee." Juno shook her head. "Doesn't look like it." Thorne, sensing the mood in the room tipping dangerously toward chaos, held up his hands. "We need to think this through. Panic won't help anyone. But what the hell do we do?" Someone shouted from the back, their voice tinged with desperation. "We stall," Rigel replied, a plan forming in his mind. "These things are projecting through the symbols, right? Maybe there's a way to block them." Juno's eyes lit up with the glimmer of an idea. "The alien tech we found, the one we've been tinkering with, maybe it can neutralize their influence." Thorne nodded, grasping at the possibility like a drowning man clutches a life preserver. "You better work fast." As the meeting broke up, the colonists scattering like leaves in a tempest, Juno and Rigel headed back to their makeshift lab. The avatars remained, their presence looming like a bad smell. "So, how screwed are we?" Juno asked as she sifted through a collection of alien tech fragments. "On a scale from 1 to we're toast." "Probably extra crispy," Rigel replied, his focus on a particular piece of tech that resembled a circuit board mated with a crystal. Juno snorted. Comforting. The lab was a testament to human ingenuity or desperation, depending on your perspective. Parts lay strewn about like discarded dreams, and the air hummed with the scent of burnt circuits. "What's your take on this thing?" Juno asked, holding up a particularly inscrutable piece of tech. Rigel examined it, tapping it experimentally. "If we can figure out how this connects to the symbols, maybe we can disrupt the link. But it's going to take time. Time's the one thing we don't have," Juno said, a wry smile playing on her lips. "But when has that ever stopped us?" The tension in the colony grew as the avatars continued their silent vigil, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. The avatars demanded obedience, but the colonists were nothing if not stubborn. Some, weary from constant fear and uncertainty, began to crack. A few even argued that maybe worship wasn't such a bad idea if it meant survival, but most held firm, not willing to trade one form of tyranny for another. In the lab, Juno and Rigel worked tirelessly, their banter a lifeline in an ocean of despair. "You think if we solve this, they'll give us a medal?" Juno asked, her tone more hopeful than she felt. Rigel chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "If they do, I want mine in chocolate." Their efforts were slow-going, and more often than not they found themselves at dead ends. Rigel's eyes were bleary from staring at alien circuitry, and Juno's patience wore thin, but they pressed on, driven by sheer bloody-mindedness if nothing else. As the Iors dragged on, Rigel paused, rubbing his temples. "You ever wonder if we're just making this worse?" "All the time," Juno admitted, adjusting a piece of tech with the delicacy of a bomb disposal expert. "But it beats sitting around waiting to see what new way Mars finds to kill us." Rigel nodded, his hands continuing their meticulous work. "Fair point." Finally, After what felt like an eternity, they made a breakthrough. Rigel sat back, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "I think we've got something." Juno leaned in, eyes wide with anticipation. "What is it?" "This," Rigel said, holding up the alien tech, "might just be our ticket to shutting those avatars down. If we can interface it with the colonist systems, we might be able to disrupt whatever signal they are using to project themselves here." Juno clapped him on the shoulder, invigorated by the glimmer of hope. "Well, what are we waiting for? Let's give these cosmic squatters an eviction notice." The plan was risky, bordering on reckless, but then, they'd never let that stop them before. They gathered what they needed and headed for the colony's main control room, their hearts pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The control room was dark, save for the flickering lights of malfunctioning monitors, and the air was thick with tension as Juno and Rigel got to work. The avatars were still there, though their forms seemed to fluctuate, as if sensing the impending threat. "Here goes nothing," Rigel muttered, connecting the alien tech to the control panel. Juno held her breath as the system hummed, lights flickering like an old neon sign. The colony's systems groaned in protest, but slowly the symbols began to dim, their glow fading like a dying ember. The avatars flickered, their forms wavering as if caught in a static-filled transmission. For a moment it seemed as if they might vanish altogether, but then the symbols surged back to life, brighter and more malevolent than ever. "Damn it!" Rigel cursed, slamming a fist against the console. "We almost had it." Juno sighed, the weight of their failure pressing down on her shoulders. "We need more time." Rigel nodded, his frustration palpable. "And maybe a miracle." As they regrouped, Captain Thorne entered, his expression a mix of hope and exhaustion. "Any luck?" "Some," Juno replied, her voice weary. "We might be able to neutralize them, but we need more time to figure out the interface." Thorne nodded, his resolve unwavering. "Then you'll get it. Whatever it takes, we'll hold them off." Juno and Rigel exchanged a glance, a silent agreement passing between them. They were up against impossible odds, but they weren't beaten yet. The avatars loomed larger than ever, their presence a constant reminder of the ticking clock. But Juno and Rigel knew they had one advantage: human stubbornness, a resource as inexhaustible as the Martian dust. As they returned to their lab, the air buzzed with the promise of another day's battle. They were tired, they were outmatched, but they were not defeated. Not yet. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving the unsurvivable, laughing in the face of doom, and flipping the universe the proverbial bird. And if those alien gods wanted a fight, they'd picked the wrong planet to mess with. The Martian sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting a red glow over New Cydonia that looked eerily like the colony was burning. Or maybe it was just the colony itself doing a damn good impression of an approaching apocalypse. Either way, Juno figured it set the mood perfectly for the drama unfolding inside. Juno and Rigel were back in the central hub, surrounded by the usual suspects: blinking panels, hissing machinery, and the avatars, who hung around like bad memories you couldn't quite shake. Their shifting forms seemed to mock the fragility of human life on Mars, not that Mars needed any help in that department. "So, we're now officially at the Mars is trying to kill us by suffocating us stage," Juno remarked, adjusting the hopeless mess of wires and alien tech that had become her life. "Nice to see she's getting creative." Rigel was halfway into another drone, his legs sticking out comically like some deranged mechanic in a B-grade space flick. "Honestly, I'm impressed. Takes a lot of effort to suck the life out of life support systems." Their grim little exchange was interrupted by Captain Thorne, who strode in with all the enthusiasm of a man about to walk to his own execution. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up. We've got reports of people passing out in their quarters." "Well, Captain, maybe they're just overwhelmed by the beautiful Martian ambience," Juno replied, not bothering to look up from her work. Rigel snorted. "Or maybe they've finally realized how screwed we are and decided unconsciousness is better." Thorn rubbed his temples, visibly fighting the urge to throttle the pair of them. I need a plan, and I need it yesterday. Funny, I was hoping we could push it to tomorrow, Ridgel quipped, extracting himself from the drone remains. All right, enough with the jokes. We need to rally some people to protect our little decoding operation, Thorn snapped, or else we might as well start carving our own tombstones. Martian dust makes great headstones, Juno added with mock cheeriness. But yeah, I get it. We need bodies, preferably breathing ones. With a nod, Thorn left them to it, heading off to do whatever captains do when the universe is collapsing around them. Probably something involving looking important and shouting orders, Juno guessed. The colonists were gathered in what used to be the mess hall. Now, it looked more like a refugee camp, filled with wary eyes and whispered fears. The avatars had decided to up the ante, their forms flickering ominously as they drained energy from the colonists' systems like cosmic parasites. All right, listen up, Ridgel announced, trying for authority and landing somewhere in the vicinity of slightly less panic than everyone else. We're putting together a team to protect the lab while we crack these alien puzzles. Someone in the back, probably Jenkins, always the complainer, shouted. And what happens if we don't crack it? Well, Jenkins, Juno called out, you can look forward to a very peaceful afterlife sans air. There was a murmur of nervous laughter, the kind people may. Look, Ridgel continued, we don't have a choice. These glowing bastards are not going away on their own. We need volunteers to hold the line while we do our thing. A few hands went up, along with a lot of shifting feet and avoided eye contact. Fear was a powerful motivator, but so was desperation. It was the kind of desperation that had people ready to fight off alien gods with nothing but welding torches and snark. Juno looked over the motley crew of volunteers. Congratulations, you're now officially part of the Let's Not Die squad. Bring your best grim smiles and whatever passes for a weapon these days. So what's the plan, boss? Asked a woman named Lyra, who had the kind of hardened gaze that came from too many years of Martian disappointment. Simple, Juno replied. We keep those avatars from getting in while Ridgel and I work on shutting them down. If they come at us, we hit back with everything we've got. Even the coffee, someone joked. Especially the coffee. Have you tasted that stuff? Juno shot back. The laugh that followed was genuine if short-lived. It was a fragile moment of humor in a world where doom was the new normal. The volunteers nodded. A ragtag army gathered to fight the inexplicable with the indefensible. The next few hours were a blur of preparation and nervous chatter. Juno and Ridgel were back in the lab, trying to decipher alien tech that seemed determined to remain cryptic. The symbols on the devices glowed with a mocking light, as if to say, "You'll never understand us." "These things are like teenagers," Ridgel grumbled. "Full of potential but refusing to communicate in anything other than gibberish." "Yeah, but unlike teenagers, they might actually kill us," Juno replied, turning a piece of tech over in her hands. "Come on, you alien bastard, show me your secrets." Outside, the volunteers were stationed at various choke points, makeshift barricades set up from whatever they could scrounge. They watched, waiting for the avatars to make a move, their breaths shallow but determined. Inside the lab, time stretched on, every minute another tick closer to oblivion. Ridgel was buried in circuit boards, muttering to himself, while Juno worked with a focus that bordered on obsession. "Hey," Ridgel called out suddenly, "I think I've found something." Juno looked up, a spark of hope igniting in her tired eyes. "Please tell me it's the alien version of a solve everything button." "Not quite," Ridgel said, "but maybe a way to scramble their signal. If I'm right, it could disrupt their projection long enough for us to figure out the rest." "Sweet Martian Sands, you might actually be a genius," Juno said, moving over to his side. "Don't get carried away. Let's see if it works first. Then you can shower me with praise." Together, they set to work, their hands moving quickly and precisely. The hum of the machines grew, a low rumble that resonated through the metal floors like a heartbeat. Meanwhile, the avatars were still siphoning energy, their forms growing brighter and more menacing. The air in the colony was becoming noticeably thinner, and a few colonists had already been carried away, faces pale and drawn as if the very essence of Mars had seeped into their bones. Rigel connected the device, fingers crossed so tightly he could feel his knuckles protesting. Okay, moment of truth. With a flick of a switch, the lab lights dimmed momentarily, then flared back as the device kicked into action. The effect was immediate. The avatars flickered, their forms distorting like cheap holograms with a bad signal. Outside, the volunteers watched in awe as the avatars struggled to maintain their presence. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. However, the moment was fleeting. The avatars surged back with renewed vigor, their forms stabilizing as they drew even more power from the colonist systems. Well, it was worth a shot, Rigel sighed, slumping back in his chair. Juno grinned despite herself. Hey, at least we know we can mess with them. Might not be much, but it's something. Problem is, they're draining us faster than we can adapt. We're on borrowed time, and this only bought us a few breaths. Good thing humans are experts at making the most of borrowed time, Juno said, resetting the equipment for another attempt. It's that or start practicing our prayers. The grim determination lingered in the air, thick and tangible. The colony was teetering on the brink, but for a few precious moments the avatars had been knocked back. It was the smallest of sparks, but enough to keep the fire of hope alive. Rigel and Juno returned to their work, the rhythm of their efforts almost comforting amidst the chaos. The alien symbols danced under their fingers, an enigmatic puzzle that might just be the key to saving them all. Outside, the volunteers held their ground, their presence a testament to human tenacity. They might not have had the weapons or the knowledge to defeat alien gods, but they had heart, and sometimes that was enough to make the impossible possible. As the Iors dragged on, Juno and Rigel waged their silent battle against the alien technology, their minds racing against the clock. The colonist systems whined under the strain, but still, they pressed on, defying fate with every stubborn breath. The avatars watched, an ever-present threat lurking in the periphery. But the humans remained unbowed, driven by the simple hope that came from standing together against the end of the world. It was, after all, what humanity did best: survive the unsurvivable, laugh in the face of doom, and flip the universe the proverbial bird. If the alien gods wanted a fight, they'd certainly found one. Juno wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of Martian grime across her forehead. The alien symbols on the console she was working on mocked her with their luminescent glow, like a cosmic middle finger for all her efforts. She caught Rigel's eye across the room, buried in his own mountain of wires and alien tech. Hey, Rigel, if Martian dust were edible, we'd never go hungry again. I swear it gets into places I didn't even know I had, she said with a wry grin. Rigel gave a snort of laughter, his hands busy with the guts of the drone. Yeah, well, if we don't figure this out, we'll be dust ourselves pretty soon. Just another featureless pile on the Martian landscape. Juno glanced at her makeshift crew, the self-proclaimed Let's Not Die squad. They were a ragtag bunch of colonists who looked as though they were auditioning for the role of extra with no lines in a disaster film, except it was real, and they were all that stood between survival and a slow fade to black. All right, listen up, Juno called out, her voice the only authority in a room full of nerves. We've got a potential solution, but it requires precision, coordination, and a miracle. So basically, we're screwed, Jenkins cut in, always the ray of sunshine in their apocalyptic gloom. Not necessarily, Juno retorted, giving Jenkins her best mock-stern look. But if you keep up that attitude, I might just let them drain your oxygen first. The group let out a chuckle, the kind that rattles in your chest when you've got nothing else left to lose. It was exactly the jolt they needed, a reminder that humor was their ultimate defiance against the universe's sense of humor. Seriously, if we can synchronize our efforts, we might just be able to disrupt these energy-siphoning bastards, Juno continued. Rigel, you want to explain? Rigel stepped forward, holding up a small device that looked suspiciously like a mashed-up calculator from the 1980s. This little beauty here is going to be our savior, or at least that's the plan. It can scramble the Avatar's signal, but we need to activate it at the exact moment they try to drain us. Think of it as a cosmic game of whack-a-mole, but if you miss, the mole eats your face, Juno added helpfully. Great, Jenkins muttered. Always wanted to die in a carnival game. Look, I know it sounds like a long shot, but it's the best shot we've got, Rigel said, pacing like a man trying to work off the weight of an entire planet's problems. We need everyone at their stations, ready to act at a moment's notice. We only get one chance at this. What about the Avatars? Lyra asked, her eyes hard like they were carved from Martian rock. Won't they try to stop us? Juno nodded. Yeah, they're not going to sit around and let us pull the plug. That's why we need you all to be ready. As soon as they make a move, we hit back hard and fast. Think of it as a dance, Rigel suggested, his grin a shade too manic to be comforting. Except it's more like a street brawl and the floor's made of quicksand. The volunteers exchanged looks, some anxious, some determined, all resigned to the path ahead. They were a mix of engineers, farmers, and dreamers, none of them trained soldiers, but each ready to fight for the right to breathe another day. The Avatars, omnipresent and menacing, hovered at the edge of perception like a bad hangover waiting to pounce. They were the unwelcome guests at this Martian house party, and the colonists were the beleaguered hosts trying desperately to kick them out before they trashed the place. Back in the lab, Juno and Rigel resumed their frantic work, a shared rhythm of desperation and hope. The alien tech lay before them, both a puzzle and a curse, its secrets tantalizingly close yet maddeningly elusive. Got any more miracles in that pile of junk? Juno asked, her tone teasing to keep the edge of panic at bay. Rigel shrugged. I'm fresh out. Used my last one to get the coffee machine working last week. Priorities, you know, Juno chuckled, shaking her head. You'd think the universe would cut us a break after all this. Oh, Juno, Rigel replied, his voice rich with sarcasm. If the universe ever cuts us a break, it'll be by accident. The air grew taut with tension as the Avatars began their advance, their forms flickering with an intensity that set the colonists' nerves alight. The energy drain was more pronounced now, a hungry pull against the colonists' dwindling resources. Juno's heart pounded in her chest, a relentless drumbeat of fear and anticipation. All right, everyone, this is it. Get to your positions. We've got one shot at this, so let's make it count. The volunteers scrambled to their stations, turning the colony into a fortress of determination. Makeshift barricades were erected, welding torches and improvised weapons at the ready. It was a sight to behold, like a scene from a low-budget sci-fi movie, but with the raw, gritty edge of reality. The Avatars surged forward, their movements like liquid shadows, intent on their malicious purpose. The colonists stood firm, their resolve as solid as the Martian rock beneath their feet. Remember, Rigel called out over the comms, timing is everything. We hit them just as they start to draw power. Too early and they'll counter. Too late and we're toast. Let's hope Martian toast is a delicacy, Juno quipped, her eyes never leaving the console. The lab was a flurry of activity, wires crisscrossing like a chaotic spider's web, each connection critical to their success. Juno's fingers danced over the controls, a maestro conducting a symphony of survival. The Avatars reached the colony's perimeter, their eerie glow casting an otherworldly light across the landscape. The colonists braced themselves, hearts hammering in unison. Steady, Juno whispered, though whether to herself or her comrades she didn't know. Steady. The tension was palpable, a living thing that thrummed through the air, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. It was the calm before the storm, the moment of truth that would define their fate. Now, Rigel shouted, his voice slicing through the silence like a knife. Juno slammed her hand down on the console, triggering the device. The colony lights flickered, dimming to near darkness before flaring back to life with renewed vigor. Outside, the Avatars faltered, their forms spasming as the disruption took hold. The colonists seized the moment, their improvised weapons coming to life in a blaze of defiance. The scene was pure chaos, a cacophony of light and sound as the colonists fought back with the fury of the damned. The avatars recoiled, struggling to maintain their presence, their energy siphoned disrupted by Rigil's impromptu invention. Juno watched the chaos unfold on the monitors, her heart in her throat. The avatars were wavering, their grip loosening, but the price was steep. The colonists' systems groaned under the strain, teetering on the brink of collapse. "Keep it up," Rigil urged, his eyes glued to the readings. "We're almost there." The battle raged on, a desperate struggle against an enemy that defied understanding. The colonists fought with everything they had, fueled by the hope of a tomorrow that seemed increasingly out of reach. And then, just as hope began to falter, the tide turned. The avatars shuddered, their forms flickering one last time before disintegrating into nothingness, a cascade of light swept away by the triumph of human ingenuity. A cheer rose from the colonists, a ragged cry of victory that echoed through the corridors like a lifeline. They had done it. Against all odds, they had held the line and survived the assault. Juno sagged against the console, her exhaustion overwhelming. "We did it," she murmured, disbelief tinged with relief. Rigil slumped beside her, grinning like a fool. "Told you I'm a genius." "You're insufferable," Juno shot back, though her smile betrayed her words. The colony was still standing, battered but unbowed, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was theirs, hard-won and precious. As the dust settled and the adrenaline faded, Juno and Rigil shared a quiet moment amidst the chaos. They were survivors in a world that had tried its damnedest to erase them, and for now, that was enough. "So," Rigil said, breaking the silence, "what's next?" Juno looked at him, her eyes tired but resolute. "Next, we rebuild, and maybe, just maybe, we find a way to make this red rock a home. Because that was the way of things on Mars. When the universe threw its worst, you threw it right back with interest. And somewhere in the spaces between stars, the humans laughed and lived to fight another day." The air inside the central hub was as thick as the mood, tense with anticipation, and filled with the kind of dread that makes you wish you'd opted for a safer career, like lion taming or bomb disposal. Captain Thorne loomed over a map of the colony like a brooding statue, his brow furrowed as though he was single-handedly trying to solve world hunger and world peace simultaneously. "All right, folks," he barked, his voice cutting through the cacophony of nervous energy. "We've got one shot at this. I want everyone at their stations, no screw-ups, and try not to die." It'd mess up my day. The colonists scattered like cockroaches in light, each heading toward their post with the enthusiasm of a goth at a pep rally. Juno and Rigil, running the show from behind consoles that looked like they'd been salvaged from a thrift shop, were the only semblance of calm in the chaos. Juno's fingers danced over the controls like a seasoned gambler about to roll the dice on a winning hand. "Think this'll work?" Rigil asked, his eyes glued to the tangled mess of wires and tech that looked suspiciously like a high school science project gone awry. Juno gave him a sidelong glance. "If it doesn't, at least we won't be around to face the consequences." "Comforting," Rigil replied, dry as the Martian dust that seemed hell-bent on invading every crevice of their existence. "Always aim to please," Juno shot back, her voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that years of Martian living had honed to perfection. They watched as the avatars loomed ominously, their spectral forms advancing like a tech support nightmare come to life. These alien entities were as welcome as a tax audit and equally relentless. "All right, people," Juno called out over the comms, her tone as sharp as her resolve. "Remember, when I say now, I mean yesterday. And don't forget," Rigil chimed in, "if it all goes to hell, make sure you're not the closest one to the airlock." Jenkins, never one to miss a beat, piped up from his station. "Just remember, folks, if you see a tunnel with a light at the end, it's probably just the aliens coming to finish the job." The avatars drew nearer, their presence an oppressive weight that pressed down on the colony like a boot on a bug. Juno's heart drummed a frantic tattoo in her chest, a relentless reminder that failure wasn't an option. Not anymore. "Here they come," Rigel murmured, his eyes narrowing at the flickering monitors. Juno nodded, her gaze fixed on the alien symbols spreading across the console like a virulent disease. "On my mark," she said, her voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. 3, 2, 1, now." She slammed her hand down on the console and the colony sprang to life. Lights flickered madly, and the air was filled with the electric hum of machinery pushed to its limits. The device Rigel had whipped up, a mad scientist's wet dream, sent out a pulse that rippled through the colony's systems. For a moment, the avatars hesitated, their forms flickering as if caught in a bad reception. The colonists cheered, a sound of defiance and adrenaline, their collective willpower pushing back against the tide of alien malevolence. "Keep it up, we've got them on the ropes," Rigel urged, his eyes never leaving the displays. The colonists' systems groaned under the strain, but they held. Barely. It was like watching a tightrope walker over a pit of hungry alligators, messy, nerve-wracking, and liable to end badly. Juno's heart lodged itself somewhere in her throat as the avatars began to retreat, their forms dissipating into wisps of light. The colonists roared their approval, the sound echoing through the corridors with a fervor that could have shaken worlds. "We did it," Juno exclaimed, a grin breaking through the mask of tension she'd worn for what felt like an eternity. Rigel slumped back in his chair, a manic grin plastered on his face. "Hey, who's the genius now? You're still insufferable," she laughed, though her eyes betrayed her relief. Captain Thorne's voice crackled over the comms, his gruff tone softened by a rare hint of approval. "Good work, team. Now let's hope they stay gone." The colonists celebrated with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for tax rebates or surprise days off. They'd held the line against an enemy that defied comprehension, and in doing so, proved that humans were nothing if not stubborn. As the adrenaline faded, they surveyed the battered landscape of New Cydonia. The colony was worse for wear, but still standing, a testament to the resilience of those who dared to carve a life on a world that wanted them dead. Juno and Rigel lingered in the control room, the weight of victory settling heavily on their shoulders. The battle might have been won, but the war for survival was far from over. "So," Rigel began, his voice laced with sarcasm, "what do we do for an encore?" Juno shook her head, a rueful smile tugging at her lips. "Next, we rebuild," she said, echoing the mantra that had seen them through countless crises. "And maybe, just maybe, we find a way to make this red rock a home. Because that was the way of things on Mars. When the universe threw its worst, you threw it right back with interest. And somewhere in the spaces between stars, the humans laughed and lived to fight another day." The Martian sky was a canvas of crimson and shadow, a reminder of the harsh beauty of their adopted home. It wasn't paradise, not by a long shot, but it was theirs, every scarred inch of it. "What do you think the aliens will try next?" Rigel asked, his tone light despite the gravity of the question. "Whatever it is," Juno replied, "we'll be ready. After all, we're experts at not dying." Her words hung in the air, a grim affirmation of their reality. But beneath the cynicism and sarcasm lay a truth as solid as the Martian rock beneath their feet. As long as they had each other, they had a fighting chance. Jenkins shuffled over, his gait as weary as his jokes. "Hey, Juno," he began, a sly grin splitting his face. "Remind me never to play poker with you. You're too good at bluffing." Juno chuckled, her spirits buoyed by the camaraderie of her fellow survivors. "Don't worry, Jenkins. Next time I'll let you win." The colony settled into a semblance of normalcy, or at least, as normal as life on a hostile planet could be. The systems were patched up, the tech jury-rigged to a semblance of functionality, and the people carried on with the grim determination of those with no other choice. As the dust of the day's events began to settle, Juno and Rigel found themselves on the outskirts of the colony, watching the sun sink below the barren horizon. The sky was a riot of reds and golds, a stark contrast to the monochrome existence they endured below. "You know," Rigel mused, "there was a time when I thought living on Mars would be romantic, adventurous even." Juno snorted, the sound filled with a lifetime's worth of skepticism. "And then reality sucker punched you in the gut." "Pretty much," Rigel admitted, a rueful smile playing at the corners of his mouth. They stood in companionable silence, the weight of their shared experiences a tangible presence between them. In the quiet there was a sense of peace, fragile and fleeting but real. "Think we'll ever get used to it?" Rigel asked, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Juno shrugged, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Maybe, or maybe we just get better at pretending." "Either way," Rigel replied, "we keep going. One day, one crisis at a time." And that was all they could do: survive, adapt, endure. In a universe determined to break them, they'd forged a stubborn defiance as fierce as the planet they called home. As night fell over New Cydonia, the stars emerged one by one, their cold light a reminder of the vastness beyond. But for Juno and Rigel, the true wonder lay in the resilience of their fellow colonists, their unwavering spirit a beacon in the Martian night. "Guess we'll just have to see what tomorrow brings," Juno said, her voice a quiet promise that echoed in the stillness. With a final, lingering glance at the alien sky, they turned back toward the colony, a small, battered enclave of humanity on a world that wanted them gone. But they were still here, still fighting, still determined to outlast the odds stacked against them. Because on Mars, survival wasn't just an option, it was a way of life. And as long as they had each other, they'd keep on living to fight another day. The Martian dawn clawed its way over the red horizon like a reluctant cat, casting a dim light over the battered colony of New Cydonia. Juno squinted against the weak glow, her eyes flicking over the makeshift repairs that littered the landscape like a bad art installation. The air smelled of oil, burnt circuitry, and the faintly metallic tang of desperation, a scent she'd grown disturbingly fond of. "Rise and shine, sunshine," Juno muttered to herself, her voice barely audible over the distant whine of machinery. It was time to face another day on this rock that seemed to delight in creative murder. Rigel trudged over, rubbing sleep from his eyes with the determination of a man who'd much rather be anywhere else. "Morning," he grunted, eyes barely open. "Or whatever the hell passes for morning here. What's the plan today, fearless leader?" Jenkins appeared behind Rigel, his perpetually amused expression doing little to hide the exhaustion etched into his features. "I was hoping for something relaxing, like a meteor shower or a full-blown supply crisis." Juno snorted. "If only we could be so lucky." "We're back to fixing the hydroponics before they decide to stage a coup." She glanced over at Captain Thorne, who stood like a granite statue surveying his domain, a man who had mastered the art of brooding to an Olympic standard. He caught her eye, nodding in what could almost be mistaken for approval if you squinted hard enough. The hydroponic gardens, or what was left of them, were a sorry sight. Once a lifeline, now a bedraggled patch of wilted greens and browning leaves that looked like they'd been sneezed on by an angry god. Juno sighed, crouching down to inspect the damage. "Looks like a salad bar after a food fight," she muttered. "More like a science experiment gone wrong," Rigel added, crouching beside her. His hands moved deftly, coaxing life back into the machinery with the patience of someone who'd long accepted that Mars was a temperamental roommate. Juno tapped a few buttons on her console, a relic from the 1980s that had somehow survived the apocalypse. "Let's see if we can coax it back to life," she said, flipping switches with the grace of a seasoned pro. The garden lights flickered on, casting a pale glow over the struggling plants. Jenkins let out a low whistle. "I gotta say, that's some killer mood lighting." "Yeah, if your mood is existential dread," Juno shot back, though she allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Rigel leaned back, surveying their handiwork. Think they'll pull through? More than we will if we don't figure out the food situation, Juno replied, her tone dry enough to out-sarcasm a desert. Jenkins tapped his chin thoughtfully. I've heard the dust diet's quite popular with the locals. Maybe for you, Rigel snorted. I prefer my meals not taste like the inside of a vacuum cleaner. Despite the bleakness, there was an undercurrent of camaraderie that pulled them together. The avatars, those ethereal interlopers, were gone for now, and in their absence the colonists found strength in the shared chaos. Captain Thorne ambled over, his expression set in its usual grim lines. Good work, he said, the words almost foreign on his tongue. Keep this up, we might just avoid starving to death. High praise, Juno replied, raising an eyebrow. You should write greeting cards. Thorne's lips twitched, a hint of a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Don't tempt me. As the day wore on, the colonists found themselves immersed in the mundane heroics of survival, patching leaks, coaxing machines back to life, and avoiding yet another dust storm that loomed on the horizon like an unwelcome guest. Juno found herself at the central hub, where the tension was as thick as the Martian atmosphere. The alien symbols still lay dormant, a reminder of the dance they'd narrowly survived. They're not gone for good, Rigel said, joining her. You know that, right? I know, Juno replied, her voice soft yet firm, but we'll be ready for them. Optimistic, Rigel noted, a smirk curling at his lips. I thought cynicism was more our style. Call it a momentary lapse, Juno shrugged, her eyes on the symbols. Besides, if they come back, we'll just have to remind them whose planet this isn't. Their laughter mingled with the noise of the colony, a sound that was as defiant as it was hopeful. Against all odds, they had held the line, and in doing so, forged a bond stronger than the forces that sought to break them. As the sun began its lazy descent, painting the sky in violent hues of orange and red, the colonists gathered in the common area, a ragtag assembly of weary faces and stubborn resolve. We made it, Juno announced, her voice cutting through the chatter. And as much as I hate to sound like a motivational speech, I'm damn proud of us. Jenkins raised his canteen, a mock salute. To not dying, to not dying, the others echoed, their voices a chorus of determination and gallows humor. Captain Thorne cleared his throat, his expression serious but not unkind. We've got a long road ahead, but if we've proven anything, it's that we're not going down without a fight. Or at least not without giving Mars indigestion, Jenkins quipped. Laughter rippled through the group, a balm against the trials they'd faced. In that moment, they were more than just survivors. They were a family forged in the fires of adversity. As the night settled over New Cydonia, Juno and Rigel found themselves once more on the outskirts, the stars a distant promise of possibilities untold. The air was cool, the silence punctuated by the occasional creak of settling metal. You think we'll make it? Rigel asked, his voice laced with genuine curiosity. Juno considered the question, her gaze fixed on the horizon. I think, she said slowly, that as long as we keep fighting, we've got a chance. Not exactly a glowing endorsement, Rigel chuckled. Hey, it's the best you're gonna get, Juno shot back, a grin tugging at the corners of her mouth. Their laughter mingled with the night, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that refused to be extinguished, no matter how dire the odds. To tomorrow, Rigel said, raising an imaginary glass. To tomorrow, Juno echoed, the words a quiet promise that hung in the air between them. And with that they turned back toward the colony, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because for all the hardship and heartache, they had one thing Mars couldn't take away: each other. In the heart of New Cydonia, beneath the unyielding Martian sky, a new day loomed, unpredictable and unforgiving, yet filled with the stubborn hope of those who dared to dream. As the humans laughed and lived, they stood defiant against a universe that demanded their surrender. But surrender wasn't in their nature, and so they endured.